Hi, I'm Maddie.
I'm Brianna.
And I'm Rebecca.
And we will be discussing the acoustics of the voice.
This includes things like vocal mechanisms, vocal health,
and we will also be discussing the concepts of tuning and blending.
The difference between a bright and a covered sound is where the sound sits in your mouth when you actually produce the sound. If it's a covered tone, it's going to sit more in the back of your throat.
Hey, cut it out, okay?
And if it's a bright sound, it's going to rest more in your mask and it's going to resonate here.
Oh my God!
And you can tell the difference when you produce these sounds, because if it's covered, it's going to resonate and you're going to feel a lot of movement and vibration in your throat. If it's a bright sound, you're going to feel vibration literally right here in what we call your mask.
As you can probably tell whenever you lose your voice, vocal health really has a lot to do with your sound production, and it has to do with the acoustics of your voice. So we talked to Dr. Wayne Pope here in the voice faculty, and he gave us some basic tips for vocal health, what to do when you're feeling sick, if you should sing, if you should not sing, and how that just affects your sound overall.
Quick fixes for singers who are ailing, and a lot of it depends on how you feel, particularly in your throat. We have nasal passages that can get irritated. Then the nasal pharynx, or the back of the throat, gets irritated. If it's really down on your throat, I would say down in this area, you just really want to be quiet and lay off, because that's where the vocal folds and all the area around them get irritated. And we want to just lay off the vocal folds if they're inflamed. But that's the best thing to do, is lay off.
So this is a diagram that our vocal teacher actually gave to us to memorize, and it has everything you will ever need to know about the voice on it. Right here, we have our nasal cavity. Just below it is the oral cavity. You can see the pharynx, the larynx, the esophagus, the trachea, the lungs connected to the bronchus, the heart, and the diaphragm.
We interviewed Jennifer Brennan-Hondorp, another member of WKU's music faculty, to get some of the details on the 4 components of sound production.
So basically what I teach, as far as the nature of vocal sound, I break it down into 4 basic sort of rudimentary elements. And the first is respiration, having to do with breathing. And the next is phonation, having to do with the voice box or larynx and the vocal cords. And as we take a breath in the respiratory process, the breath moves through the larynx, and the vocal folds or vocal cords vibrate. And the next step is resonance or resonation, which means that those are basically amplifiers to amplify the sound, or that phonation process is amplified through 3 main resonators: the oropharynx, the nasopharynx, and the laryngopharynx. And the nasopharynx being here, the oropharynx mouth, the laryngopharynx part of the larynx. And then from there, it's the articulation process. So the words that we use, the combinations of vowels and consonants that we use to communicate the text. And there are 3 main elements to the articulation process, and those are the lips, the tongue, and the soft palate. And those all create and shape the words that we use to sing and communicate.
So the thing about pitches is that you can sing the right pitch, technically, and still not be in tune. You've probably heard people in ensembles or even in your own singing that were a little bit flat or a little bit sharp. And that especially affects things when you're in a choir. Now you can have an E, and if you sing that sharp, technically it is still an E, but it is not in tune. So we're going to take a look at a couple of us. We're going to sing some notes, and we're going to purposely manipulate the pitch and the tuning so you can see what it sounds like when someone is in fact out of tune.
When people come together to sing in an ensemble, obviously not everyone is going to pronounce their words the same way, and so singing in a group, you have to put in extra effort to make sure that all the vowels are the same so that you get a good sound and it stays in tune. In this demonstration, I'm going to be talking about tuning and how your vowels can really affect your voice placement. So I'm going to sing one note. It's going to be in the back of my throat, and I'm going to try to bring it forward so you can see kind of where it resonates and how that affects your acoustical sound. Then I'll try to sing it really bright, really forward, and then bring it to where it should be.
Just to produce some healthy sound, I believe was the question, I want you to think of the vocal instrument as being in three parts. We call it the tripartite instrument, and you tell that to your friends and you'll be very impressive. Three parts: motor, activator, attenuator is one of the ways to think of it. Sort of like a car. It has a motor, it has a transmission, and it sends power to the wheels, right, in some sense. So we always want to take good breaths, use breath support. What does that mean? That means that we actually speak on the air that we have. This is just a sound source here. That's not the end of it. We have to speak nicely in our mouth because that is what we call these days the filter. And if any of those three parts aren't doing their fair share, that's where we might get to feel vocally tired.
All right, so there are four main voice parts: soprano, alto, tenor, and bass. Now, as most of you probably already know, soprano is the top female voice. Alto is the bottom female voice. Tenor is the top male voice. Bass is the bottom male voice.
If I didn't know the way.
Now, each of these have their own ranges, which is called tessitura, that they usually sing in, although they can sing higher or lower depending on the person. Just as a point of reference, C4 is middle C, which you'll find on a piano. And any number lower than that, like C3, C2, that's going to be, of course, in the lower range, and anything higher will be in the higher range. So sopranos typically have a range of C4 to C6. Altos typically sing from G3 to F5. Tenors will usually sing from C3 to C5. And our basses will sing E2 to E4.
We interviewed Dr. Brennan-Hondorp, head of the choral department here at Western, to ask him about his techniques and opinions on blending and vibrato in an ensemble.
In general, when I place voices, I've done it two different ways before. One way is to line up sort of the darker color voices, darker timbre voices, and line voices up roughly between from dark to light, and then look to line those lines up front to back. So a darker line is in back, and a brighter line is in the front. And I have the capacity to shift timbres by shifting lines front to back. So that's one way. Depending on the group, that can be an effective way of matching voices. And the other way I do it will be to find some of the more colorful voices and look for different ways to allow those voices to sing out freely and put other voices around them that make their sound sort of mesh together a little bit more with the other voices in the ensemble. But both of those are effective ways to place voices. One gives you a little bit more opportunity to change the color more readily, but both of them can be effective.
Next, we interviewed Dr. Jennifer Adam. We asked her to talk about tuning and intonation, and we also asked her to discuss how different voices tune together.
The way I address tuning frequently in ensemble is I do unison tuning, where I have everybody singing together the exact same pitch and hearing them go up a half step, go down a half step, up whole step, down whole step, and just tuning the individual note, where I tune in unison versus tuning chords, because you can tune chords but you can also tune unison passages. So I spend a lot of time working on it so they hear a uniform sound across the ensemble, going to different pitches, going to maybe a third or to a second, and then bringing them back to that unison and getting that note back in tune where it's just unison tuning. When I talk about having individuals who might be out of tune, check out Weston Noble. Has this whole philosophy. He's written books on how to tune your ensemble, where what you do is you place people in certain positions where you might have 3 people standing together and they sound horrible together, but if you change their placements, like instead of going 1, 2, 3, go 3, 2, 1, or 1, 3, 2, and the voices change based on their dominance of hearing. If they're left ear dominant versus right ear dominant, and depending how the people surrounding them are dominant in their sound, and how they match pitches and match sound based on the people next to them. And when you do it in person, it's kind of crazy, because you go like, those people sound really bad together, and you switch and go like, okay, that's completely different. How did that happen? I don't know, but hey, it works. Hey. So that's one thing I do with tuning within an ensemble and getting the sounds together, because sometimes some voices just clash when they're next to each other, and that causes intonation issues. That is almost a blend issue, but becomes an intonation issue when the blend isn't fixed. And that's what I work on.
Vibrato is a supernatural process in the voice, and certainly when we are teaching young voice students of all ages to sing, we're encouraging them to sing with the very natural process of airflow over the vocal folds, which produces a natural vibrato. Vibrato is going to have different frequency rates in each singer, but that can affect the way chords line up, because we're looking at an inexact, in essence, an inexact pitch, where if this is the actual pitch, the vibrato is going to send the note that that student is singing in or out of tune. And so as you sing chords, it can be a color choice with multiple voices singing like this, to sing with big, full, open voices that way, and alternatively they can be sung with more bright forward focus sound that basically minimizes vibrato and takes the pitch variance from here to perhaps here. And the tighter the voices get to there, the greater the expanse of the overtones series that's heard over and above those above the voices. So there are 2 different colors, 2 different approaches, both of them very valid, yielding different results. And that's kind of, for me as a conductor, that's kind of the fun of it, is to pick and choose the colors of my orchestra and create a sound that's effective in delineating what the piece means and how it's expressed.